Delegates, please be in order. Privilege this morning to have with us to give the invocation to the convention, Reverend Richard C. Barth, Director, Friends of Alcoholics here in the city of Jackson. Brother Barth.
Shall we bow together in prayer, please? Most gracious God and Father, how thankful we are that Thou art a God of not only the great things, but the little things of our lives. We're thankful, Lord, that Thou art interested concerning this convention and each one that is here. And Lord, how we do pray this morning that those who are here and know and love Thee might be sensitive to Thy leading and Thy direction in all of their deliberations. Lord, if there's any here that are not mindful of Thee and the power that Thou hast upon their lives, we pray that they might realize that all things in life are to be submissive unto Thee. And therefore, Lord, we're looking unto Thee to speak to hearts and to accomplish that which is needful here this morning. We pray that as they have the election of officers, that surely the ones of Thy choosing might be put into the positions of authority, thereby they might be used of Thee to direct this organization in a way pleasing unto Thee. We pray that they might assume their positions, realizing that Thou and Thou alone dost permit people to have places of authority. May they use their authority wisely, and therefore may this organization be directed in a way where it will accomplish the most good, and whereby Thy name might be glorified. For we do ask it all in Jesus' precious and lovely name. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Barth. We understand. Time we'll receive the final report of the Credentials Committee, who will be given by Co-Chairman Jones, Brother Jones.
Mr. President, at the present time we have 208 delegates that's registered, and since the last report I believe there have been 3 additions, and we now make a move that these delegates be seated.
You've heard the committee's report, and privilege this morning to have with us to give the invocation to the Reverend Richard C. Barth, Director, Friends of Alcoholics here in the city of Jackson. Brother Barth.
Shall we bow together in prayer, please? Most gracious God and Father, how thankful we are that Thou art a God of not only the great things, but the little things of our lives. We're thankful, Lord, that Thou art interested concerning this convention and each one that is here. And Lord, how we do pray this morning that those who are here and know and love Thee might be sensitive to Thy leading and Thy direction in all of their deliberations. And Lord, if there's any here that are not mindful of Thee and the power that Thou hast upon their lives, we pray that they might realize that all things in life are to be submissive unto Thee. And therefore, Lord, we're looking unto Thee to speak to hearts and to accomplish that which is needful here this morning. We pray that as they have the election of officers, that surely the ones of Thy choosing might be put into the positions of authority, thereby they might be used of Thee to direct this organization in a way pleasing unto Thee. We pray that they might assume their positions, realizing that thou alone dost permit people to have places of authority. May they use their authority wisely, and therefore may this organization be directed in a way where it will accomplish the most good, and whereby thy name might be glorified. For we do ask it all in Jesus' precious and lovely name. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Barr. We understand. Time we'll receive the final report of the Credentials Committee, who will be given by Co-Chairman Jones, Brother Jones.
Mr. President, at the present time we have 208 delegates that's registered, and since the last report I believe there have been 3 additions, and we now make a move that these delegates be seated.
You've heard the committee's report and that these additional delegates be seated. We have a second of that motion. Any discussion? Not all in favor of the motion signify it by saying aye. All opposed? Motion carried and so ordered. Thank you, Brother Jones. Now, as all of you know, at 10 o'clock, as a matter of a constitutional requirement, we'll have the election of officers. Brother Jones, co-chairman of that committee, will conduct the election. I suspect that you will set up here. The procedure you'll follow will be to call the roll. And as the delegates come forward, you'll advise them, or when you call them out, as to how many votes each will cast. Is this correct? Are you prepared to conduct the election? You got your ballot box ready? Get everything ready and get it up here. I got just 1 or 2 little items. And then we'll proceed.
Should be done. This thing is a number that is not seen. And they're going to switch it over. And it should be done.
All right. Brother Jones requests that I advise the delegates that if we have any delegates present, that some of your representatives have had to leave, which means that all of your votes won't be cast, that the committee would like to know about this. Now, in other words, if you want to change, for instance, if your local union has 300 members and you've delegated 150 votes to each delegate, one delegate's gone, at this point you need to advise the committee that that delegate wants the whole 300 votes. After the roll call is started, it'll be impossible to make these changes. So if we have any situation of this kind, they should advise the chairman of the committee immediately. Come to the committee room in the back. Situation this morning that I want to bring before the convention and it relates to a news story. I first recognize the fact the reporters are not present this morning. They've done their hatchet job and left. I want to read you a story that appeared in, I understand, yesterday's paper. I didn't see it till last night. It was in the early edition of the Clarion Ledger. Part of that story I want to read to this convention, and of course some of you have probably already read it. The Mississippi AFL-CIO adopted by close vote Monday a petition against the renewal of the license of television station WLBT by the Federal Communications Commission. State AFL-CIO President Claude Ramsey ruled the body voted in favor of the petition in spite of a call from the floor for a standing vote. Ramsey declared the station consistent, et cetera, et cetera. No point in me reading the whole story to you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is a most serious matter as far as I'm concerned. This matter that we are about to get involved is a most serious matter. And there should be no question in anybody's mind what the labor movement's position is in regards to this particular situation. When this matter was placed before this convention on Monday, and the delegates were given the opportunity to vote, I thought that I made a special effort to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to speak his piece. And if there was anyone wanted a division of the House, I thought that I afforded him that opportunity. According to the story in that paper yesterday, I didn't do that. Now, under the rules of parliamentary procedure, of course, the resolution can't be reconsidered this morning, but for the sake of the record, and for the sake of whatever might happen in the future, this convention needs to have a division of the House on this question this morning. And as president of this organization, I'm requesting a division of the House this morning on this particular question. I want to know where we stand. We need it for the FCC when we file a petition. This story, to show you how important this is, this story in this paper will be used when the petition is filed, and that's the reason it's in there in the first place. Now, I realize again, of course, that the thing was voted on Monday, but for the sake of the record, we don't have any objections. I want a division of the House. Do we have any objections to a ruling on this? A division of the House? If not, all in favor of resolution number 5 that was enacted on Monday concerning filing this petition, please stand. All in favor of the motion, please stand. Will the Sergeant at Arms please take note? All right, please be seated. All opposed to filing the petition, or all opposed to resolution number 5, please stand. Will the Sergeant at Arms please count the vote? All of you voting against resolution number 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Is that correct? 12? 12 opposed. The record will show that there was 12 votes cast against the resolution. I appreciate the convention affording me this privilege this morning, but this had to be done. Is the Credentials Committee ready to proceed with the election? Will the Sergeant at Arms please contact the Chairman of the Credentials Committee and ask him to come to the podium? All right. I might make this suggestion to you. Those of you that have been in our conventions and went through our elections before realize that this is a rather lengthy procedure. It'll be necessary to call the roll, advise you how many delegates you cast. You'll come up and cast your vote. And I'm fearful that we won't be able to get this over until the noon hour. Now, when it begins, I would like to request, in order that the chairman of the committee, and because of the delegates, in order that they might understand or hear the names as they're called, when you cast your vote, be as quiet as possible and return to your seat or else wherever you want to go. And frankly, I think it will probably be after lunch before we'll be able to continue with the convention business. If we do get through with the election prior to lunch, we'll make an announcement, give you time to get back into the hall prior to lunch. Otherwise, I think we could leave here this morning under the assumption that convention business would be resumed in the afternoon session. Is the committee ready? Okay. As well take care of this time. We got a couple of committees that we could probably get the report here. We want to get one of the short ones. You got a long one. Brother Schaefer, chairman of the Constitution and Bylaws Committee, advises me that he can give a partial report to the convention. Brother Schaefer.
Thank you, Brother Ramsey. Since this is a matter of clarification in the Constitution, and each of you has a copy in your kit, I would ask you to get your Constitution and follow with me. This will not come in the manner of a resolution, inasmuch as it's not a controversial issue or really has no background. It's merely a clarification. If you would turn to page 4 in your Constitution and look at line 9. It's section 2 of Article 3. This is dealing with representation based on per capita vote in convention. And I will read the first section of the Constitution and point out the change recommended by the Constitution Committee after reading. Beginning with line 5, section 2, affiliated local unions in good standing shall be entitled to representation and votes in conventions of the council based upon the average number of members on whom per capita tax and dedicated assessments has been paid for the 12-month period ending 30 days before the official convention call, except that local unions affiliated for as much as 3 months of that period, but less than an entire period, shall have the number of delegates and votes based upon the average of all the months affiliated. The committee recommends on line 9 that the words newly chartered be inserted immediately after that, except that newly chartered local unions affiliated for as much as 3 months of that period, but less than an entire period, shall have the number of delegates and votes based upon the average of all the months affiliated. The exception is made further on in this section, but this tends to confuse the issue just a little. So with those 2 words inserted, we feel that it would eliminate any question that might arise at a later date. Did you follow me? Does anyone wish me to repeat this? In line 9 on page 4, it's dealing with section 2. Insert after the word that, except that newly chartered locals affiliated for as much as 3 months of that period, but less than an entire period, shall have the number of delegates and votes based upon the average of all the months affiliated. Any questions? Mr. Chairman, the committee recommends that this be adopted by convention.
You've heard the motion, committee's report to insert this clarifying language into the Constitution. Do we have any discussion on the motion? It's really not a constitutional change, it's merely clarifying matters what it amounts to. We have any discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion signify it by saying aye. All opposed? Motion carried and so ordered. Thank you, Brother Schaefer. Where's Brother Pilot, Chairman of the Officers Report Committee? I think we could take care of his next. Is he in the house? Brother Bill Pilot? Here he is. We'll try to get some of the shorter ones out of the way while we're waiting on the Credentials Committee to finish their tabulation. Bill Pilot, Chairman of the Officers Report Committee.
Thank you, President Ramsey. It's indeed a privilege this morning to been appointed to the chairmanship of the Officers Report. It's a privilege to be in this convention at this time. The Officers Report Committee, composed of William Pilot as chairman, L.D. Clark, and J.R. Salzman. The Officers Report Committee met with all committee members attending. We have prepared a brief report which I would like to read to you at this time. The convention delegates have received copies of the report from our President and Secretary and Treasurer already. And it is the intent of this report to briefly commend our officers in connection with the programs of the Mississippi State Labor Council, AFL-CIO. As we look at the accomplishments of our state council under the capable leadership of its officers, it can be said that our officers have engaged in a dynamic, energetic program for the benefit of working Mississippians, particularly those within the membership of the AFL-CIO. The committee is aware of the outside forces who try to destroy our officers and what they stand for, but it can be said that our council officers have done a job that merits the commendation of all of us for their devotion to duty and making such considerable progress. The committee is of the opinion that our support of the Mississippi Labor Council and its officers need to go further than that which concerns just our membership. It can be noted that the progress in such fields as legislative, the 1963 elections, public relations, organizing the unorganized, and political elections has been a major factor in the influence and the stature of the labor movement in the state of Mississippi. We must more vividly recognize that the rights and the responsibility rest not entirely upon our officers, but also the rank and file as partners. Our rights to representation must be accompanied by a genuine sense of responsibility to pay for it. A real challenge faces us in the labor movement, and no less those of us in Mississippi. Unified effort and support of labor's program will restore our ability to serve our members' better interests. The committee urges even greater support of its officers in broadening our programs. Our officers' effort and record as viewed by this committee is deserving of commendation and enthusiastic support. This is the report of the Officers Report Committee, and on behalf of the committee, I move that the report be received by the convention.
You've heard the committee's report. A motion to adopt the Officers Committee's report. We have a second to that motion. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor of the motion signify it by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried and so ordered. Thank you, Brother Chairman. Well, I'm advised that the election committee is prepared now to conduct the election. And I'd like to ask Brother Marvin Taylor, if he will, to come forward and...
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
point of information.
Yes, sir.
When Brother Jones was making his announcement there a while ago as to the
Yes.
certification of the further delegates,
Yes.
the announcement was made that if any local union had delegates who had presented credentials
Yes.
and who were now absent, that those votes would be apportioned to the remaining delegates in the hall.
Yes.
Section 7 on page 5 is as follows. The apportionment of votes of each organization shall be included in the report of the Credentials Committee and shall not be changed except upon further report of the Credentials Committee. Now, in the past, as I have understood this section to be interpreted, the purpose of a delegate presenting credentials, and once he is seated as a delegate, the credentials of that organization are automatically apportioned. If he participates in the proceedings as a seated accredited delegate, then those votes are apportioned. And he cannot, by his absence, then give those votes to the remaining delegates that remain. Now, that's always been the way it's been construed in the past. And Section 9 takes care of that by providing that if the regular delegate cannot be in attendance, then his alternate shall present credentials and shall be seated by the Credentials Committee as the official representative of that body and to cast the apportioned vote. So I just raised the question.
I think probably
that.
the best thing to do now, of course, this is the correct interpretation of the Constitution, no question about this. It might be well if we make an inquiry as to whether or not there's been any request to make changes of the chairman. I assume when he made the announcements that he wanted this information before he gave his final report. I assume this was his position. Brother Jones, have you had any such requests?
Yes, I have had some, the delegates, some had to go home, and they have come back and wanted some of their associates to give the authority to vote their amount of votes that they had. For instance, our local, one of our members couldn't be here, and it was requested that we give one of our delegates his votes. And I'm representing Carpenter's Local 1471 from Jackson, Mississippi. Some of the CWA amalgamated clothes workers has changed some of theirs, likewise.
Now, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to be contentious about this, but in order that there might not be any further reflections on the proceedings, I want us to travel according to what our Constitution provides. My contention is that if these delegates who are now absent were seated in this convention upon the credentials that they presented and participated in the affairs of the convention, that once they did so, the right is waived for that vote to be transferred unless by unanimous vote of this convention that this section of the Constitution be set aside and that that authority be given to the Credentials Committee.
Right. We understand, Brother Bruton. I think probably this matter should actually be resolved by the convention. Brother Jones has stated his situation. He was under the assumption that the committee could make these changes prior to the committee's final report. You've been given an explanation. Is there any objection to the changes that have been made by the chairman or by the Credentials Committee in this respect? If not, then I assume by unanimous vote that the convention will apportion the votes as the committee recommends.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Credentials Committee have that authority to reapportion the votes on the remaining delegates in the hall.
Fine. You've heard the motion. Do we have a second to that motion? All in favor, do we have any discussion? All in favor of the motion signify it by saying aye. All opposed? Motion carried and so ordered. This time I'll turn the gavel over to the chairman, co-chairman of the Credentials Committee, Brother Jones, who will conduct the election, and that matter will proceed immediately.
Is our committee got the ballot box and all, and the ballot properly prepared? I say, has the committee got the ballot box and the ballots properly prepared?
Committee that the election has been complete. The ballots have been cast. Due to the fact that we have several committee reports yet to be made, some business to take care of, I have asked them to advise the delegates to please come back to the hall. We'll try to transact as much business this morning as we can in order that we might get through a little early this afternoon. So if you'll be patient and stay with us, as soon as they all get in, we'll start again. Sergeant at Arms, please come up and distribute the package of resolutions on the table up front. Gate somebody to find the Sergeant at Arms, I guess. Hey, Smitty, the resolutions, please be seated. Would you come up on the podium, please, as soon as you get through with your business? Convention will please be in order. The convention will please be in order. In order that we might expedite matters and get our business wound up a little sooner, we're going to try to take up some committee reports this morning. The chairman of the Constitution and Bylaws Committee has advised me he's ready to report. There have been a couple of resolutions passed out on proposed changes by the committee, which you're receiving now. And as soon as every one of you have a copy of this, the chairman will make that report. Do all of you have copies of resolutions 9 and 10? No. No? We'll have to give them a little more time. Copies of the resolutions. If you don't have, hold up your hands, please. 9 and 10. There's some in the back there. Right in the back. This time, Brother Jack Schaefer, chairman of the Constitution and Bylaws Committee, will continue with that committee's report. Brother Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going through the Constitution, we'll try to keep it in order, and in so doing, we'll deal with resolution number 10. And if you want to follow it in your Constitution, since you have the copy, it deals with matter on page 6, Article 4, Section 1. I'll read the resolution. Whereas certain problems have arisen with the present designated time of the regular convention of the Mississippi AFL-CIO, and whereas district races and elections for Congress are now running during the convention period, and whereas the state legislature could also be in session at the time of convention, now therefore be it resolved that Article 4, Section 1 of the Constitution be amended to read as follows. Regular conventions of the Mississippi AFL-CIO shall be held biennially in even-numbered years at a time designated by the Executive Committee. The executive officers shall issue the call of the regular convention not less than 90 days preceding the convention. Mr. Chairman, I move the adoption.
You've heard the committee's recommendation to adopt resolution number 10, which is self-explanatory. We have any discussion on that motion? You ready for the question? State your name, please. Give us your name and local number.
Adams, local 199, GBB, Gulfport, Mississippi. President Ramsey, a point of information I'd like to iron out here, because it seems to me that with the election of officers here today, is it correct that they'll be for 2-year terms?
That's right. That's right.
Now, just what will we run into somewhere along the line? Won't someone, if we extend this to an even year, that'll make 1966, wouldn't it?
No, the only thing that this resolution does, frankly, is it gives the executive committee more leeway in setting the convention date. present time, if you see the language, we only allowed a couple of months with a little leeway, which means that, frankly, right now, this is the situation. We have the legislature in session. We have congressional election going on. Had to get prepared for the convention, all of these things at one time. If we'd have been able to have set the convention date, say, in the fall, August or September, then we wouldn't have been so involved. And all this thing does is give the executive committee some leeway in setting the convention time other than those 2 months named in the Constitution.
Okay, thanks.
We have any other discussion? Not all in favor of the motion signify it by saying aye. All opposed? Motion carried and so ordered. Brother Schaefer.
The next you have in your kit, it's resolution number 1. The committee is proposing an amended resolution to you. I'll first give you the amendment, and you can make the changes, and then we'll read it within its entirety. This is on the third and last page of resolution number 1. Section 8. If any local union is unable to pay all or part of its per capita tax because of, after off, insert the word temporary, financial difficulty caused by strikes, lockouts, strike the word or, unemployment of its members, insert the following, or similar emergencies. The remaining portion of it is the same. Did everyone get that? Would you like me to go through it again? I will read it and mention the insertions as we go. This is the last page of resolution number 1. Now, I haven't made any reference to the Constitution. If you would like to work with the Constitution, it's on page 16, beginning with line 5, section 8. Okay. If any local union is unable to pay all or part of its per capita tax because of, after the word of, insert temporary. Continue to read, financial difficulty caused by strikes, lockouts, scratch the word or, unemployment of its members, comma, insert or similar emergencies, comma. Then the remaining portion of the resolution will stand as it presently is. Okay, we'll read the resolution within its entirety as amended. Whereas during the past 2 years, a number of local unions have experienced difficulty in their bookkeeping arrangements relating to the payment of per capita tax and dedicated assessments. And whereas similar problems exist at the Labor Council office, and whereas the logical solution to the problems appears to be a consolidation of the per capita tax and the dedicated assessment into a monthly per capita tax, and whereas the Executive Board is of the opinion that several local unions not affiliated would do so in the near future if a slight reduction in monthly dues were put into effect by this convention. Now therefore be it resolved that Article 10, Section 1 through 8 of the Constitution be amended to read as follows. Section 1. Each local union shall pay into the treasury of this council per capita tax of 20 cents per member per month based on the preceding month's membership on the actual number of dues-paying members in Mississippi. Section 2. An organization desiring to affiliate shall pay the current month's per capita tax plus an affiliation fee of $5. Section 3. Dues shall be payable on the first of each month for the preceding month. Section 4. An affiliated organization which becomes 3 months in arrears shall not be considered in good standing and shall be notified promptly of this fact by the Secretary of Treasury. Section 5. An organization which becomes 4 months in arrears shall have this fact called to its attention promptly by the Secretary of Treasury, and if it should become 5 months in arrears, it shall stand suspended for membership in the Mississippi AFL-CIO. Section 6. An organization which has been suspended or which has withdrawn may be reinstated within a year of such suspension or withdrawal by payment of all amounts due at the time of suspension or withdrawal and per capita tax from that date to the date of reinstatement, in addition to a reinstatement fee of $10. An organization which has been suspended or withdrawn for more than 1 year may be reinstated by payment of reinstatement fee of $10 and 6 months per capita tax affiliation for the purposes of representation in conventions of the Mississippi AFL-CIO shall be computed from the date of which such payment is made. The Executive Committee may modify the reinstatement fee where extenuating circumstances exist which, in their judgment, warrant such action. Section 7. A local union paying per capita tax on less than its full dues-paying membership shall be subject to suspension by the Executive Committee. The Executive Committee may require a local union to produce proof of membership where reasons exist to believe such local is violating this provision. Such proof shall be a copy of the capita tax record that the local furnishes the International Union, such other proof that might be necessary if per capita tax record are not available. If the local union shall fail or refuse to produce such proof on request, the Executive Committee may base its determination on such evidence as may be available. Section 8. If any local union is unable to pay all or part of its per capita tax because of temporary financial difficulty caused by strikes, lockouts, unemployment of its members, or similar emergencies, it shall report such circumstances to the Executive Committee, which may, if convinced the circumstances justify, instruct the Secretary of Treasury to waive such per capita tax from month to month until a local shall be able to pay full per capita tax. Subject to the approval of the convention, the per capita tax so waived shall be treated as paid for the purpose of representation in conventions of the council. Be it further resolved that the words dedicated assessment be removed wherever they appear in the Constitution in order to conform with the intent of this resolution. And be it finally resolved that these constitutional changes shall become effective as of June the 1st, 1964. Mr. Chairman, I move its adoption.
You've heard the committee's report. The motion to adopt resolution number 1. We have any discussion? Brother Knight?
Mr. Chairman,
Brother Bruton?
I noticed one phrase in here that perhaps would be confusing in that it is a synonymous term, and in order that there might not be any question in anyone's mind, I think that it perhaps should be clarified by using the same term continuously throughout the reference is made to the payment of per capita tax, with the exception of in one place, and the term dues is used. In the first, second, third, fourth paragraph on page 1, in the fourth whereas the Executive Board is of the opinion that several local unions not affiliated would do so in the near future if a slight reduction in monthly dues. Now, if that word is changed to monthly per capita tax, then you are in conformity throughout the resolution and you don't have the two terms dues and per capita tax. I move that
Would you like to offer a motion to that effect?
Yes, that we amend that by changing the word monthly dues to monthly per capita
Monthly
tax.
per
there.
capita?
Yes.
Where it appears in the resolution? That would, the fourth whereas, Claude?
Yes, in the fourth whereas.
Whereas the Executive Board is of the opinion that several local unions not affiliated will do so in the near future for a slight reduction in monthly per capita tax
In monthly per capita tax.
were put into effect by this convention.
Yes,
You move that the resolution be amended to that effect.
that's right. Instead of dues, monthly
Yes.
per capita tax.
And that the language also be inserted elsewhere in the resolution to that effect?
Well, the only other place would be in section 3.
Yes.
The section begins with dues.
That would be per capita tax.
Dues shall be payable, and it should be per capita tax.
Capita
should be
tax
paid.
shall be payable.
Yes,
And your motion is to amend
In
both
those two
whereas with per capita tax.
those two places.
Yes. Do we have a second to that motion? We have a second. We having a discussion on the amendment? If not, all in favor of amending the resolution that has been outlined, signify it by saying aye. All opposed? Motion carried and so ordered. I'm going to ask Brother Knight to expound on this proposition a little bit for you. I think you need to have an explanation in its entirety. Be made acquainted with some of the problems that we have in the office. Brother Knight.
Mr. President, delegates, with reference to the resolution calling for the consolidation of the per capita tax and dedicated assessment as it is at the present time, and reducing the total of 22.5 cents per member per month to 20 cents. I'd like to briefly go back to August 1st, 1961, when the 12.5 cents per dedicated assessment became effective. Now, as we all know, the affiliated locals have several different manners in which, under the Constitution, which they can pay their what is owed this organization. Now, of course, this is yearly, twice a year, quarterly, monthly, what have you. Now, when this became effective, this dedicated assessment, some of the locals were maybe a month back to the rear. Some had paid beyond that particular date with their 10 cents per capita. Then, of course, the dedicated assessment was paid effective August 1st. Now, consequently, this got the thing zigzagged or cattywampus or whatever, any way you want to call it. Well, a local was paid up to one date, dedicated assessment, one date per capita tax. Now, we are all humans, and people are going to be human regardless of what happens. We're not machines. Consequently, the thing got off to a bad start. Some locals, the situation was worse than others. And certainly I don't have any particular organization in mind. This is just a problem we have. A lot of local unions, beginning in January, had a new Secretary of Treasury. Oftentimes, when the Secretary of Treasury of a local goes out of office, they don't have too much interest in what happens after that date. New Secretary comes in. Maybe the other officers, business agent, international rep, what have you, maybe is not around, available for some time to assist the new secretary with the book work. Well, they notice their books where the State Labor Council was paid up to dash date 10 cents per member per month. paid up to dash date 12.5 cents per member per month. Well, you can imagine most of them just walked out in disgust until someone came in to try to enlighten them on this. Now, immediately after the convention, we sent out a detailed letter which we hope would be of assistance to the locals in implementing this payment. After that, several other letters followed. Not to all locals, but locals seem to be having problems. But to make a long story short, we've had problems all this time. Problems that are unnecessary, seemingly to me, on the local unions and on the state council office. As you know, we have been charged with the responsibility of keeping books on this, the 12.5 cents separate and apart from the 10 cents. We've had one bank account, but we've had to keep books on it separate. Now, this has not been an easy job, I assure you, if we attempted to post it as it should be. Now, we're simply saying this in this resolution, this amendment, that we combine this thing and we cut the overall total of 22.5 cents to 20 cents and make it a simple per capita tax. Now, another thing that I think added problems to this was this half cent. Again, this takes just a little bit more figuring to figure out what the local union owed the state council. Now, it's just simple that a round figure and one payment, 20 cents on dash members, is pretty easy done. We have also, as the resolution states, been told by some different local unions that they felt that this slight reduction would at least serve to encourage their locals to become affiliated. Now, at least we can't make it any harder to get locals affiliated, and there might be a chance that this will make it some easier. Now, we, of course, before we proposed this, went into the financial picture of this organization. We feel that on the present affiliation, with the possibility, and of course these possibilities or potential affiliations don't boil the pot, but we believe with the adoption of this resolution that we are on better grounds with which to go to these other local unions and present to them the program of this organization and what we can do for them and make it clear to them that we need them. Also, we believe that the adoption of this resolution will do away with the problems that we have bookkeeping, the problems that the local unions have. So I would urge you to support this resolution. One further thing here. If this resolution is adopted, as you noticed, it calls for June 1st as the effective date. We will make all efforts to balance the thing out, and probably some of you have paid beyond June 1st, but that'll all be taken care of, and you'll be credited in like manner.
Brother Bacon?
That was a question that I wanted to ask, because our local union, and I'm sure the other local unions, pay by the year.
Yes.
And to keep the books straight from our local union and the books straight from the council, it would appear to me that it would, as an even keel situation, that if the council would reimburse the local unions for the per capita tax that they have paid over the ones paying by the year, which would be a 6-month period, that would, you were complaining about the difference in the bookkeeping, that would be easier on the council and also on the local unions.
Well, I would say this about that. There are going to be some certain problems if it's put into effect, certainly. We'd give consideration to working the problem out with the local union if that's what they wanted. This would take this matter up with the executive committee and evaluate it. I think probably some people would want to apply whatever they'd paid in against their dues. They'd be advised, what we'll have to do is work out a standing of local unions, and if those that fall in this category, we can communicate with you and advise you about what the situation is and find out how you want to go about handling the matter.
Well, we have, and I'm sure that the local unions that pay by the year, we have 3 standing bills in our local union, one to the Mississippi Labor Council, one to the Jackson Central Labor Union, and one to the Mississippi Electrical Workers Association. And the first of the year, we know these bills are paid, are due, and the amount, because unfortunately, we are not like a building trades. We don't have the turnover that a lot of people do have. And we know exactly what's going to be there, and those bills are paid on the first of the year for the year in advance. So you get the benefit of our money in a year in advance. And in the case that we should pick up membership, then we make the difference payments into each organization.
Right.
But for the last 10 years, we haven't had any additional. We have always lost. But we haven't gone back to the organizations that we are affiliated with and asked that they reimburse us for the members that we paid on that we do not have. But that, as I say, is a bill that's a standing bill that comes due the 1st of January of each year. And to keep our books straight, we would like to see it that way.
Well, of course, this applies to several other local unions. Several that have paid their dues in advance, and this is something that would have to be worked out, and I think we'd probably have to handle it on a local-by-local basis with the officers of the local. Brother Schaefer said he wanted, maybe he might can clarify the thing, and then you can have it next.
I would just like to suggest a convention on behalf of the committee that those fortunate local unions that have the per capita tax and dedicated assessments paid for the entire year or anything beyond the effective date of this resolution, should it be adopted, that the council office give them a notice of credit as of December the 31st or the effective date of the amendment. That way the secretary will know exactly what per capita tax payment would be due upon the next payment. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Schaefer. Would you give us your name and local, please?
Cliff Fallows, Local 1133, Pascagoula, Mississippi. Point of clarification, Mr. President. In consolidating this dedicated assessment and per capita tax,
Yes.
is it the intent of the council that this other 10 cents that is involved in this, where we've got it down to 20 cents, would be put aside for the original purpose of the dedicated assessment?
Yes, there won't be any change in the council's program. It'll just simplify the bookkeeping arrangement and what have you. As Brother Knight pointed out to you, we've got a tremendous problem. The dues is 10 cents, the dedicated assessment 12.5. This means a 2.5 cent reduction in the overall picture is what it amounts to.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other discussion? You ready for the question? All in favor of the motion to adopt resolution number 1, signify it by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried and so ordered. You want to try another one? I got about 5 minutes. He's got one more here. I think probably it would help if we could take it. Is that the only one you got left? A couple more. Let me ask you, delegates, would you like to continue? Probably won't take over 10 more minutes to take care of the Constitution Bylaws report. It might help out to get out a little early this afternoon. Does anyone object to continuing past the noon hour for a few minutes? All right, Brother Schaefer.
The next we'll take up is resolution number 8. And it deals with the Constitution on page 17, section 11. Jack,
Number
I
eight.
don't believe they have 8 out
Sorry,
yet.
number 8.
They do have 9 before them if
How
you'd
about
like
8?
to start with
You
that.
have 8? Did you get resolution number 8? 9 and 10 has been voted.
You have 9?
You have 9?
Yeah.
We'll take 9. Yeah. Well, we'll take up 9, and they'll be passing out the other. Number 9.
Number 9 deals with the Constitution on page 17, Article 11, Section 1. I'll read the resolution. Whereas the Mississippi AFL-CIO has been faced with certain problems concerning the specific language of Article 11, Section 1 of the Constitution, and whereas the Program of Progress was adopted by the Convention in 1961, has caused the Council's activities to change and the duties of certain officers to shift, and whereas the logical solution of this problem seems to be that the specific language of the Constitution tying down the duties of the legislative vice president should be changed and place the assignments in the hands of the executive board. Now therefore be it resolved that Article 11, Section 1 be changed to read as follows. The legislative activities of the Mississippi AFL-CIO shall be under the direction of a legislative representative designated by the executive board. He shall conform to the policies laid down by the conventions of the council and by the executive committee. He shall submit a written report of his activities and of the action of the legislature of the state of Mississippi within 60 days of its adjournment to the executive committee, which shall cause the written report to be distributed to the affiliated organizations. The legislative representative shall also make a report to the biannual convention. Mr. Chairman, I move its adoption. The second whereas, Brother Ramsey just called it to my attention. I'm sure you've noticed in the reading. Following the second whereas, the Program of Progress, which was adopted, which is omitted. I would offer you the suggestion that it be inserted.
You've heard the committee's report and the motion to adopt resolution number 9. Do we have any discussion?
Point of information, Mr. Chairman. In the third whereas, the logical solution to this problem seems to be that the specific language of the Constitution tying down the duties of the legislative vice president should be changed and place the assignment in the hands of the executive board. What is meant by the terms executive board?
Would you like to explain?
Yeah.
The executive board of the council is the 10 board members plus the 3 vice presidents, secretary, and chairman, president.
In other words, that would be an action done by the executive officers in conjunction with the general executive board.
That is true.
All right. That was my point, and eliminate some discussion. I do think, for clarification, inasmuch as there is some lack of clarity in Article 5. Article 5, Section 1 of the Constitution provides for executive officers of the council consisting of a president, 3 vice presidents, and secretary treasurer. And then the language, in addition, there shall be 10 executive board members. So you have a dual term there, executive officers and executive board. inasmuch as that is a provision of Section 5, or Article 5 rather, setting out two different terms, it would perhaps be best that the whereas in Resolution 9, which I referred to and raised the question on, should be changed and place the assignment in the hands of the General Executive Board and the executive officers. In other words, that way you include them all by specific wording rather than a hodgepodge gathering together.
You offer that as in the form of an amendment, Brother Bruton, to the resolution? That would actually be in the constitutional language of the resolve.
Yes, placed in the hands of the general executive officers in conjunction with the executive board. That way, then, you've got full statewide representation of both the executive officers
Yes, we
and the
understand,
general
but we
executive
want that
board.
exact language now. If you want to amend because this is constitutional language, it's not in the whereas, see?
All right, sir. I will not read the full thing, but
Yes.
should be changed and place the assignment in the hands of the executive officers and the executive board.
All right. You've heard the amendment and the explanation, which actually brings the thing in conformity with the Constitution elsewhere. We have a second to that motion? Brother Rainey? Would you get the mic down there, please, and give us your name and local for the record?
J.W. Rainey, Local 87, Jackson. To actually keep this language in there, we're going to have to go down there to the now, therefore be it resolved, and the legislative activities of Mississippi, AFL-CIO shall be under the direction of a legislative representative designated by the executive board. That's where we're going to have to change it down there, isn't it?
That's right. That's what he's referring to. That's what he's referring to
Instead of up
now.
in the whereas.
Yeah, it's not. He's not referring to the whereases. It's in the language of the constitutional
Well, that
language.
change would normally follow, Mr. Chairman, that
Yes.
your resolve would have to carry the same language.
Would you, Brother Bruton, would you mind writing those changes down?
The only question I'm raising, inasmuch as Brother Schaefer explained it, it's clear. But at some future date, somebody might raise the question, well, nowhere is a general executive board defined as to what constitutes it. I was just discussing that with Brother Barnes. Nowhere is a general executive board comprised of both the executive officers and the 10 board members defined and so constituted as a general executive board. And my language here is to include all of them so that in the absence of a convention proper, the state as a whole, through all of its elected officials, would discharge this function, and no one could ever say that the 5 executive officers got together and connived and did so-and-so when the full state is represented in this action.
Well, we understand. I understand what your motion is. I just want to make sure we had the exact language of the amendment before we voted on it.
Yes,
Yes.
I'd be happy to do
Well,
that.
the matter's clear, I think, as a discussion as to what your motion is. And if you'll write the exact language down and make sure that we get it in the resolution before the Constitution is printed, this is what I'm getting at.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And
Will you
that
do that?
language will be, place the assignment in the hands of the executive officers and the executive board.
All right. We have any further discussion on the amendment? What'd you say? Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes. Brother Bowers?
Bert Bowers, General Executive Board. This change would necessarily have to follow in the now therefore be it resolved, because you have the same situation. And you would change it in the third whereas and also in the therefore be it resolved. You'd have the same language in both.
Well, that's what I was pointing out, that the resolve part of it is the actual constitutional change. The whereas is frankly immaterial. We got to make sure we get the resolve part of it right, because that's the constitutional language. Yes, sir, Brother Bruton.
That was my explanation,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
that in the resolve, that change would normally follow in substitution for the executive board.
Right. Right. That's clear. It's clear to me. Is it clear to the delegates? Any further discussion on the amendment? Not all in favor of the amendment signify it by saying aye. All opposed? Motion carried and so ordered. Now on the resolution as amended. We have any further discussion on the resolution? What did you say?
How will it read now?
Now therefore be it resolved that Article 11, Section 1 be changed to read as follows. The whereas, the logical solution of this problem seems to be that the specific language of the Constitution tying down the duties of the legislative vice president should be changed and place the assignments in the hands of the executive officers and the executive board.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to adopt the amended resolution signify it by saying aye. All opposed? Motion carried and so ordered. Brother Schaefer advises me he has one more, and probably we can finish his report up with your patience.
Move right to the top page of
Let me see, have you got a copy of resolution
number 8.
number 8? Nobody got a copy of resolution number 8? Don't have a copy of 8? All right. Will you please get a suggestion? Take a little time here. And we are in the noon hour. We could recess for lunch, and they can pass out all of the resolutions and have them on your desk when you come back, and this way we'll again save some time. Does that meet your approval? All right. Do we have any announcements before we recess? Any announcements before we recess? Brother Beckham?
Brother Chairman, this is not an announcement. I would just wonder if I'm in order, as we have just got through with the election. Here before, the only report on the election that we have gotten in the proceedings has been the officers elected. I wonder if I'm in order to make a motion that the delegates assembled here be given a list of each when it's read out, that the election committee read out each vote that each nominee got, or if that's not possible, that it be put in the proceedings when they go out to the various local unions. If that's in order, I'd like to make a motion to that effect.
I don't think we have to have a motion unless you just want to. The committee can make its report through the mic, and his remarks and his report will be recorded in the convention proceedings.
Well, it hasn't been done before, just the elected officers. It just give the elected officers and no figures.
You want the vote, or if you want to offer a motion to that effect, that they read the vote count on each candidate, then I'll
yes,
accept
that's
that
what
motion.
that's what I'm driving at, or else be put into the proceedings that will go out to the local unions, one way or the other. We'd like to know.
Well, if you want to offer the motion and that report is given in that fashion, it will show up in the proceedings. I'll accept that motion. Do we have a second to it? We have any discussion on that motion? If not, all in favor of the motion signify it by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Any other announcements? Not, we'll stand recessed for lunch. Delegates, please take their seats. Please come to order. We're privileged this afternoon to have with us one of Mississippi's most outstanding citizens. In our efforts to attempt to find what we felt a later speaker to address the convention, we contacted Mrs. Hazel Brannon Smith, editor and publisher of 3 small newspapers in the state, Lexington Advertiser and the Northside Reporter. What's the other one? Durant News. And she graciously accepted our invitation to address the convention. Mrs. Smith has been one of the few voices in the state speaking out with reason. There have been certain groups in the state of Mississippi, because of her voice of reasoning, felt that that voice should be quieted. These people established a newspaper in our own hometown in an effort to put that paper out of business. As a result of a number of her editorials in our newspapers, she was recently considered for the Pulitzer Prize Award, the highest award that a newspaper woman or a newspaper man can receive in these United States. Hazel was just recently given that award. We're indeed happy that Hazel was able to come out and be with us this afternoon under most trying and difficult times. She's just coming in from a trip, Minnesota, I believe it was, and her office secretary fell dead yesterday. She hasn't got home yet. But in spite of her difficulties, she did come by to fill her engagement with you. It therefore gives me a great deal of pleasure to present to you Hazel Brannon Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Ramsey, very much for that very flattering introduction, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your very gracious response. This morning at 6:30, I was riding down the street in St. Paul, Minnesota, en route to the airport and this meeting, and I saw on the side of a building in huge letters, painted blue on a white background, these words: freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom from fear, freedom from want. And as the airport limousine speeded by, I just barely had time to see the great big letters at the bottom of the signature, and it had AFL-CIO on it. The trade union movement, of which this Mississippi Labor Council is historically a part, is an association of free men, traditionally working for a better opportunity and a better world for laboring men and women everywhere. I salute you in this worthy endeavor. I know that it is popular in some circles in Mississippi to be anti-labor. But as a little girl, which was an awful long time ago, in Gadsden, Alabama, where I was born and reared, some of my earliest memories were of men getting beaten up, actual violence used on these men for one reason, to try to scare them into not joining a union. And this was what was then the Gulf State Steel Company, which was later, at that time, it was the largest independent steel corporation in the South. Later, it was sold out to the Republic Steel Corporation, and it's still now in operation and employs over 5,000 people in Gadsden today. So I have been brought up to believe in the rights of all people, and that includes the working men and women of the South and of this nation. And I do salute you. This group of people that I know is a responsible group of Mississippi men and women who have just as much at stake in this state as I have, or as any other editor, or as any other facet of our society, whether it's management, business, or the professions. And I know that each one of you people has just as much love in your heart for this state as I have, and that you want to see it grow and progress just as I do, and just as the other people of the state ought to want to see it grow and progress. I feel like this is a big state, this is a big country here in the South, and it's a great nation. I feel like that all of us, there's room in this state for all of us, and I feel like that we should all work together, whether we're politicians, state government, local government, laboring people, business people, professional people, or what have you, that we all ought to be a part of this state. And that goes for white people and Negroes and all the other people that dwell in our state. I am tired, plain tired, of having a certain group of people in this state try to appeal to the lowest, most base motives of all our people. I'm tired of pressure groups trying to set one man against another, one group of our society against another. I was greatly distressed myself when the man who is now our governor, Mr. Paul Johnson, was the only candidate that would not meet with your own leaders here. I mean, to me, that smacked of something that wasn't quite like it ought to be. I mean, in other words, where are we going to get in this state with industry if we don't have labor to support it? I mean, how much industry can you have if you don't have men and women who are going to work in that industry? And to say that a person is anti-South or anti-Mississippi or something just because he wants to belong to a labor union, I can't buy that myself. But then I've just returned from St. Paul, as Mr. Ramsey told you, where all of the Pulitzer Prize winners for the first time, at least all those who could get there, which were 9 out of 12, were there at a program to be honored and also to honor 15 young foreign journalists who are here in the United States studying for the past year. And this program, which they had yesterday at McAllister College in St. Paul, honored us as well as those young journalists, and we got to know each other. And here were 15 young men, all representing a different country. And you know, in spite of the fact that they had been here in this nation of ours for the past year, there were still so many things about us, I mean, that you would be surprised, that I was surprised to hear them say. Believe me, the American image today could stand a little facelifting. We're living we hear this so much that it's become trite. But believe me, ladies and gentlemen, we are living today in an age where it is important what other people of the world think of us. We're the greatest, richest, finest, most wonderful nation in the world. We have a lot of faults, we have a lot of things that need correcting, but basically our motives are good. But there are various strains in our life today that will not stand the close examination of people. And of course, race relations in the South are one of those things that will not stand that test. It is important what other nations think of us, because we need all of the people of the world to help us in our commitment to a free society. These freedoms that I just mentioned to you, these freedoms that we all want to enjoy, these freedoms that we all want for all of our people, if we are going to live and grow and progress in Mississippi and the South and bring our income up to the rest of the nation in order that we might truly come into our own. We all have heard the phrase that the second half of the 20th century belongs to the South. But that is not going to be true unless this thing of race relations, unless this thing of union labor, and a few of the other problems that face us today are met and resolved. We can't just stick our heads in the sand like ostriches and say everything's all right and everything's fine and everything's coming up peaches and cream. We just can't do that. It would be easier to do that. But we have got to meet our responsibilities. Now the freedoms that I mentioned that were on that sign, on that building in St. Paul, I'm sure that all of you support and subscribe to. There was one freedom on there that wasn't mentioned, and that's the freedom that's very dear to me and very important to you, and that is freedom of the press. Because you can't have your freedom of speech and your freedom of religion and all the other freedoms that you want to exercise in your life, you can't have those freedoms unless we have freedom of the press. Because it is on that freedom of the press that all of our other freedoms depend. And when a free press is sacrificed and you don't hear the truth because the truth isn't reported, well then you're going to lose the freedom you have. I'd like to read something that a great journalist said 60 years ago. And of course it's just as true today as it was then. This was Joseph Pulitzer of the New York World. And this is what Mr. Pulitzer said in the North American Review in May of 1904. He said, "Our republic and its press will rise or fall together. An able, disinterested, public-spirited press with trained intelligence to know the right and courage to do it can preserve that public virtue without which popular government is a sham and a mockery. A cynical, mercenary, demagogic press will produce in time a people as base as itself. The power to mold the future of the republic will be in the hands of the journalists of future generations." I think that is a sermon in itself. Today, a free press in Mississippi is being attacked. We have in our state a number of pressure groups. And I'm sure that some of you belong to some of them. That is your right. You can belong to anything you want to. That is your right. But I am saying this, that organizations like the White Citizens Councils in Mississippi, which seek to force everyone into a pattern of absolute conformity and demands that you follow the line that they put forth, is robbing you of your freedom and is robbing me of my freedom. These people appeal to that is less than human in each of us. They trade on age-old prejudices and fears. They set one man against another, one group against another. And the very people who trade on race to influence these groups are the very people who also are against you. I want to see the honest, decent, working men and women of Mississippi wake up and tell the citizens' councils to go to hell. There are other groups that we won't even mention, because I don't think anybody in this group would belong to organizations like the Ku Klux Klan, which is on the subversive list of organizations of the U.S. Attorney General, and I'm sure that all of you know that. I don't believe you would belong to the other organization, which is just an offshoot or branch of the same type of thinking, the Association for the Preservation of the White Race, and that's dedicated to keeping America white for our children and our children's children. That is the way they describe their objective. Now, I don't have a thing against white people. I'm a white person myself, and I love white people. I believe in states' rights. I believe in local self-government. I believe in racial integrity. I believe in white people marrying white people and Negroes marrying Negroes. I believe in all those things, those high-sounding, lofty things that all of these pressure groups say they believe in and are dedicated to. But the thing about it is, I believe in constitutional rights and local self-government and all of those sort of things. I believe in those for everybody, not just for one group, one religious group, or one group of white Protestant Anglo-Saxon Americans. I believe in them for Jews and Catholics and all the other people. I mean to say this, that I think it is time that Mississippi comes out of fighting the Civil War that was 100 years ago, and that we come into the modern era, into the 20th century, that we cast off those prejudices and those feelings that we have got to keep our foot on the back of the neck of the Negro to keep him in a ditch. Surely by now we have learned that if we are going to do that, that we must stay in that ditch with him to keep him down. Surely we have learned that lesson by now. The same thing can be applied to the laboring man and woman in Mississippi today. If we're going to continue to exploit labor and try to be against the working man and woman trying to get a better break, the same thing can happen in our own state. I mean, you can't keep them down without the whole state staying down. I want to repeat, this is a big state. It's big enough for all of us. And there is no reason why that we can't all work together. The great lack today in Mississippi, as many people have said, and I thoroughly agree, is a lack of communication. And that doesn't mean we don't have enough telephones. It means that you can talk at people, or you can talk to them, or through them, but you don't always communicate. You don't always know what they are saying, or what you're saying yourself. We don't always know what we read in the newspapers, because we don't always know the background of the stories that are printed. Will Rogers used to say that all he knew was what he read in the papers. Well, today, all that we know may or may not be printed in the newspapers. But certainly we acknowledge that our thoughts and attitudes are influenced by what we do read in the newspapers. And sometimes many times, although we may not realize it, our own opinions are formed and our actions, and we take actions. We do things ourselves because of what is not reported in our newspapers or other mass communications media. And I'm including not just newspapers, I'm including television and radio and all of the other mass media, which the public depends upon to learn what is going on. That is the responsibility that we have as newspapers, is to print the truth of what is happening, whether it's good or bad. Our responsibility is not to cover up the dirt in the state, to sweep it under the carpet. All it does is rot the rug when you do that. Our responsibility is to put the light on what is happening in this state so that the men and women can read the papers, listen to their TV and their radio, and know what is honestly happening in this state. And then, I believe that God has given you, the people of Mississippi, you and all the other people of Mississippi, enough native-born intelligence, enough goodwill, enough of the Christian spirit to know and to do what is right. But to do this is impossible unless you do know what is going on. And today we do need improvement in our communication. Your image needs improving. It's not just the image of America abroad that needs improving, or the image of Mississippi in the United States. And God knows the image of Mississippi really needs improving in the United States. The image of organized labor needs improving also. It needs an honest interpretation. It needs to be told what the men and women, the laboring, working men and women of Mississippi want. I think that you are entitled to it. And I think that we, the press of Mississippi, if we do not give it to you, that we are guilty of gross criminal negligence. I think the responsibility of a newspaper, and I'm talking today about your responsibility as well as mine, that the responsibility of a newspaper is not only to get out and get the truth and report it, whether it's popular or not, to give you the facts to go on, but that it is the responsibility of a real press to have fair editorial comment, to try to shed a little light on the way the editor thinks the community or the state ought to go. Nobody holds a gun on anyone and forces them to read an editorial page. But the fact is that a newspaper without a good, strong editorial page is just like a man without a backbone. I know that is true. I've never held a gun on anybody and forced them to read my column in any of my papers or my editorial page. But I do know that because I do say what I think and think what I say, that we have a larger readership today after a 10-year fight in this state than we've ever had before. And it's because the people of Holmes County and Hines County out here on the north side and down in Flora with our little Banner County outlook, those people do want to know the truth. They do want someone to tell them their opinion of what's happening in the state. And they don't have to agree with it. They know they don't have to agree with it. But they do want to know what your opinion is. It is only when editors are willing to exercise that type of responsible leadership that we can hope for our state to take a safe, orderly course into the future and not go to the extreme right or to the extreme left, but to maintain an even course in which the best interests of all the people are served. Now, there's one way that you people can help. You know, people are like sheep sometimes. One gets out in front and then everybody feels like they have to fall in line. Well, today, in this battle for conformity, in this demand by pressure groups that each one of you do exactly what your neighbor does, or that you go along and with them in everything they do, whether what they're doing is honorable and decent and just and right or not. In this battle today I challenge you today to have the guts, to have the backbone, to stand up and say, I will not go along. I will not be a party to a dishonorable act against a person simply because I don't agree with him. As I said, you have every right to belong to a citizens' council or the Ku Klux Klan too if you want to, even though it is a subversive organization. I think you have every right not to read my paper. I don't want anybody to read my paper who doesn't want to read it. If you're a man in business, you have a right not to advertise in my paper. You don't have to advertise in it at all. But brother, where you're wrong is when you go to somebody else and say, you can't advertise in Hazel Brannon Smith's paper. You can't read Hazel Brannon Smith's paper. Now let's follow this thing through to its rational conclusion. If every editor in Mississippi has to go along with the White Citizens Council, where are we going to be? Where are you going to find out the truth? If every editor has to conform to what the White Citizens Council says, where are you going to be? You're not going to be able to get the truth. If you would read the history of what happened to the press in Nazi Germany, I think you would know that the same thing is being attempted in Mississippi today. When they put in an opposing newspaper against me up there in Lexington, the local leaders of the White Citizens Council put this paper in. Some of the men went around the square and they said, you might as well come along with us because we're going to have Hazel out of business in 3 months. Well, that was 5 years and 6 months ago, and we're still going strong. Today, that newspaper has only 700 papers that it mails out in Holmes County. To be exact, let's be accurate, 742. A total mailing of 997 papers. Today, we mail out 5 times that many, and they're all to subscribers, people who have paid for our paper and people who want it because they ordered it. No names just placed on the mailing list. Now, I've said these personal things about myself because I seem to be the favorite whipping boy of some of these groups, and I suppose I'll go on being that too. But now is the time for everybody to speak out. If you don't want one little group of people running everything in Mississippi, from the governor's office and the legislature on down to constable in your town, now is the time for you to speak out. I know the people of this state, I believe, as well as anyone. I have been an editor in Mississippi since 1936. My entire adult life has been spent in this state. I was born and reared in Gadsden, Alabama, and went to school at the University of Alabama and finished in journalism there. All of my folks on both sides of my family back over 100 years were born and reared not in the South but in the deep South. I'm as Southern as you can get. And I'm sick and tired of people saying that because you don't go along with what the White Citizens Council and these other pressure groups want, that you're anti-Southern. The South that I know and love is not a place where people have to go along in fear, whether they have to live in fear, where they are called upon to hate people because of the color of their skin. That's not the South that I was brought up in and the South that I learned to love and cherish as a child. The South that I love and that I know and that I want to live in is a land of good people, people like you, people who are hardworking and honest and straightforward and who want to do the right thing, people that are not going to take advantage of other people just because they have the opportunity to, a land of gentle, kindly people who expect the best of other people and in turn give their best. That is the kind of South we need. That is the kind of Mississippi we need. That is the kind of Mississippi that we can have if today the great silenced majority, which is what you are, will now start speaking out. I know that majority is in the state. In 10 days' time, after the Pulitzer Award was announced on Monday, May the 4th, I had over 1,000 letters from people all over this nation and from foreign countries. But 3/4 of those letters were from people in Mississippi, many of them that I did not even know. People congratulating me on this honor. People saying, I'm glad this high honor has come to a Mississippian. You have done our state proud. I tell you this to say that there are people of goodwill in this state, and they prevail. There are a great many more people of goodwill than there are those of ill will. But unfortunately, the ones of ill will, the haters, the demagogues, the people who want to take from one group to give to another, the people who don't want fair play or are not concerned with fair play for all, those people are organized. And the great silenced majority of people are not. I think that now is the time for all of us to make a vow that we will be true to our Christian heritage, and that we will make a resolution now and henceforth and forevermore that we'll do our very best to try to live as good Mississippians and as good Christians and try to help build this state. And not only just to do that, which many of us are doing all we can in that direction now, but also to speak out and speak back and up to these other people. All you have to do is talk just a little bit louder than they do, and they'll shut up.
Thank you, Hazel, for those timely and inspiring remarks. We know that what your difficulty is. We regret that you won't be able to spend the rest of the afternoon with us, but we want to say that we love you very much. Keep up the good fight.
Thank you so much.
Our next speaker, I might mention incidentally that because of Hazel's difficulty, the death of her secretary, Superintendent Tubb, our next speaker, graciously agreed to allow Hazel to speak first on the program, along with our other speaker as well. We've had the honor of having our State Superintendent of Education address our convention on numerous occasions. We in the labor movement think that Jack Tubb is one of the most outstanding public officials that we have in the state of Mississippi. We think that he's done an outstanding job for public education in the state of Mississippi, in spite of the fact that it's pretty hard on occasions to find the necessary finances to get the job done. And with no more than what he's had, he's done a magnificent job, and I think each and every one of you will have to agree. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to present to you J.M. Jack Tubb, State Superintendent of Education in the state of Mississippi.
President Ramsey, ladies and gentlemen, it's really a pleasure to have this opportunity of being with you. But Claude, you're not the same fellow you used to be. I certainly didn't expect to have the opportunity of speaking after such a one who has won such an outstanding award in the field of journalism. Therefore, I'm off the base just a little bit. And I don't know what you will do to compensate for that if we get back with you. I thought my hard speech perhaps would be tonight when I tried to address the graduating class of the Choctaw Indian Agency in Philadelphia, but I found out that this is my biggest challenge this afternoon after such a fine speech. I deeply appreciate the invitation from your president, Mr. Ramsey, the invitation that made it possible for me to be with such a fine group this afternoon. I've had the opportunity of speaking to members of this organization on many occasions. And I remember the courtesies and the kindnesses that you have extended to me through the years, and those courtesies and kindnesses certainly have not gone unnoticed by me. Several days ago, I was speaking to one of our fine administrators in the field of education in this state, and he told me that he could always count on labor to help in any educational movement that would better the schools in this state. And I certainly could say to you today that I join with him in that belief, and I have found it that way. Inasmuch as I am in the field of education, I'm sure that you would expect me to talk on certain phases of our educational program. Sometimes I am led to believe that the rank and file of our people in this state are not informed as well as they should be in the field of education. We perhaps as a people in this state do not fully realize the influence that education has on the lives of the people from day to day, and also the influence that it has upon the life of a nation. Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, George Washington, DeWitt Clinton, and other great personalities have testified to the value of education and for the need of it in order to preserve our nation. They realized that without the education of the people, our nation could not endure or prevail. Section 16 of the Constitution of 1817 has this to say about education: religion, morality, and knowledge being essential to good government, the preservation of liberty and the happiness of mankind, schools and the means of education shall be forever encouraged in this state. Our people in that distant days, in that day of long ago, realized that without a good educational program for the people, that our nation could not make the progress that people are entitled to see, and it would not be a way, if they did not have it, to preserve our nation. In 1829, 4 years before the second Constitution of the state of Mississippi was written, a labor party in New York City recommended a system of education that shall unite under the same roof the children of the poor man and the rich, the widow's charge and the orphan, where the road to distinction shall be superior industry, virtue, without reference to descent. I'm sure that you appreciate that stand made by that organization, certainly many more years than 100 years ago. It was at that time in the history of our country that the poor people had to declare themselves paupers in order to get the opportunities of an education. That does not prevail now because there have been people who have fought for education through the years. There was a historian by the name of Coverley who said the friends of free schools were at once regarded as fanatics, dangers to the state. The idea of providing free education for all out of public taxation was denounced as socialistic and destructive of individual initiative. In other words, at that time, the poor person did not have an opportunity for these educational opportunities that I have mentioned to you. In the greatest speech ever delivered to any legislature of the state of Mississippi since 1817, it was made by the great Albert Gallatin Brown, governor from 1944 to 1948. He realized the necessity of a great educational program for the people of this state. And he said that a representatives of a free people need not to be, would not have to be notified about the diffusion of knowledge because everybody should have it. He further stated that the boys who grow up in vice and ignorance will be just as potential at the ballot box as the wise and the virtuous. And another thing he said that has come down through the corridors of time, and it's as applicable today as it was the day that it was uttered by this great governor: the benefits are not priceless. Speaking of education, if we are to enjoy the blessings of education and transmit its fruits to our posterity, we must expect to pay for them. In other words, we must have a program that, if it is to meet the needs of our people, that is properly financed. And this governor in 1846 realized that, and he was certainly right in his conclusions concerning it, because we cannot have a good program that will meet our needs unless it is properly financed in this state and in this nation. If we are to meet the competition of the other states of the American Union, and if we are to meet the competition of the governments of the world, we must meet it through an education, through the education of the masses of the people in this state and in this nation. A few years ago, when the Russian government launched Sputnik, it changed the thinking of the people of the world with reference to education. It taught our people in this country that an educational program is necessary if we are to meet this competition, and that program should be launched at once. And I would say that if we do not carry on a program to the best of our ability, that our schools will become as antiquated in this generation as the little red schoolhouse of many years ago in the state of Mississippi and in the various states of America. Acting under this impulse to meet the demands of our people and to meet the challenges of the world, the Congress of the United States in 1958 just passed what is known as the Educational Act of that year, and they said that Congress finds and declares that the security of the nation requires the fullest development of the mental resources and technical skills of our young men and women. The present emergency demands that additional and more adequate educational opportunities be made available. The defense of this nation depends upon the mastery of modern techniques developed from complex scientific principles. It depends as well upon the discovery and development of new principles, new techniques, and new knowledge. That was our Congress of the United States recognizing that our educational program in that year had to be implemented to give the children of this country those things that they should have in making them more efficient citizens of this country. Our program of education and research in this great country of ours, the greatest in all of the world, the strongest nation in all of the world, that educational program must be second to none in the world. And it means that if it is to be second to none in the world, that our people must show a great deal of interest in it and must be willing to pay the price in order to achieve it. Now, our schools are being called upon to do practically everything at the present time. Our people, our administrators are being called upon to place certain subject matter in the curriculum of our schools of this state and of this nation. They call upon us to teach safety, and we consider that approximately 1,500 people in our state are killed each year. Then, not to do something about this would be a grave injustice to all of our people. We lose enough because of accidents each year in order to, or twice as much perhaps, as we spend for the public schools in the state of Mississippi. Conservation is a subject that's got to be given priority in our curriculum also. And our vocational technical program that you have heard so much about during the last few years certainly must be given attention and must be given emphasis. We've had a vocational program since 1917, and I think overall it's been quite good. In that year, it was thought by the people of this country and the people of the world that we would have a scarcity of food. It was during World War I. And an educational program in the field of agriculture was launched. And the vocational teachers in the schools have pushed that program through the years, aided by certain agricultural agencies. Until today, it takes less than 10% of our people to produce all of the food that we need in America. Russia, it takes more than 45% of the people to produce the food that they need. We've got enough food to give the other peoples of the world some of it. So we want to continue all of these subjects, all of these programs that had been started in 1917, and certainly give some impetus to vocational technical training at the present time. It's been a hard time, to get that program to going, just like we would like to see it, because so many of our people have wanted their sons and daughters to study law and to study medicine and to study in the field of education and the other professions, to the neglect of the profession, to the vocational technical fields, that we've had a problem, and have had a problem throughout the country on that. But that is changing rapidly. Now, in order to meet this in the near future, we are asking the legislature to pass some legislation or pass some bills that will aid us in it. Senate Bill 1812. I bring this to you especially because you are definitely and directly interested in it, and I know that your leaders have shown a lot of interest in it. Senate Bill 1812 sets up the appropriation for the vocational technical program. We are asking the legislature to appropriate $6,750,000 in that program. That's upward of the appropriation that we're getting now for approximately $2 million. If we should get this, and it has already passed the Senate, this bill has already, the appropriation has already passed the Senate and is now being considered in the Appropriations Committee of the House. However, before it reached there, House Bill 497 was also introduced in the House, and those two bills are in the Appropriations Committee at the present time. We hope that this appropriation will be given, and we certainly can get into many of the fields that you people are interested in at the present time. It will help us out a great deal. We had a bill signed by the governor yesterday that will give an appropriation of that will give an increase in our teacher salaries of approximately $300. Those starting in with a master's degree with a AA certificate would start out at $3,600 from now on, and certainly would get $100 a year for experience up to a period of 6 years. Those with a bachelor's degree would start in with $3,300 and would get the same amount for a period of 6 years. This will give us some help in the field of education. It perhaps will help us to keep some more of our teachers in Mississippi, because we have a great number who have been going to other states, and we have lost their services. And as I have said before in this talk this afternoon, that we must have appropriations now and in the future that will challenge the brightest and best young people coming out of college to go to the classrooms and to help our Mississippi boys and girls get the finest training that it's possible to get. And that is the battle that we have before us now and in the future in the field of education. I shall certainly not take up more of your time, because you have certainly been patient. But I want to close with this thought. I have recited to you at great length and somewhat in detail the profound influence of the public schools upon the total life of this country. The influence is so far-reaching that the people of America must guard the public schools as their greatest possessions. No vested interest and no people sponsoring false ideologies should ever be allowed to get control of the public schools so as to use them for their own selfish gains. The public schools and the institutions of higher learning must always be free to teach the truth and facts concerning all issues. I deeply appreciate the fact that you have let me come before these fine people here this afternoon. And knowing them as I do, I know that they will be in that great battle to give to Mississippi children educational opportunities second to none in this nation. And the fight is on, and it will continue to be on until that dream and that challenge have been met. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jack, for those inspiring remarks, and I can assure you that this labor movement will be in the fight to preserve education, not only improve education, but preserve education in the state of Mississippi. We're privileged this afternoon to have with us an old friend of ours with us again. Many of you that have attended our conventions in the past have heard this gentleman address our convention. It's been several years ago since he was with us. I don't believe, I was trying to think this morning, I didn't consult with him about this, but I don't believe that he's addressed our convention since the merger. I could be wrong about this. If I am, then he can advise you to that effect. We have with us Reverend Louis J. Toomey, Director of Industrial Relations, Loyola University in New Orleans. The Reverend Toomey and his duties at the university deals with labor relations. He's well known throughout the United States, and he's often sought for convention speakers. We were very fortunate in being able to get him with us this afternoon, and if he'll come forward, it'd give me a great deal of pleasure to present him to you. Reverend Toomey.
Mr. Ramsey, and ladies and gentlemen of the Mississippi AFL-CIO. I am privileged, I can assure you, to have the opportunity to appear before you on this occasion. When Claude asked me some weeks ago if I would appear on this program, I very readily consented to do so, but with some reservations. And I would like to share those reservations with you. I am rather especially honored to have followed Mrs. Hazel Smith on this program. And I was quite thrilled to hear on this platform the expressions of honesty, of sincerity, and of straightforward expression that Mrs. Smith gave you this evening. Frankly, I never thought I would hear it in Mississippi. And I am overjoyed to think that despite the impressions that I had prior to coming here, now I know that we still live in a free society, even in Mississippi. Mrs. Smith treated of subjects that are of enormous importance to you and to me, for I fear that too few of us have thought through as deeply as we should the implications of the topics that Mrs. Smith dwelt on. There is a danger, and it has expressed itself in Mississippi and in Louisiana, from where I come, and throughout the South, and throughout the United States even. There is the danger that we will fail to appreciate the kind of world in which we live. We live in this world which is in a state of crisis, a crisis as serious as any that history has ever known. One measure of this crisis is that none of us have physical security. This is a new phase to civilization. Never in the past has that been able to be said with truth, but it is today true. And the reason, I think, is obvious to all of us. Man has invented the ultimate weapon. It's a weapon that can destroy all of us, and may well do so, unless you and I and all other thinking men and women will begin to appreciate what is the answer to the threat of atomic annihilation. The answer we have, and we have it spelled out for us boldly and eloquently in the very foundation of our free society. And it's spelled out in the first sentence of the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. I know that it's rather threadbare, maybe, to repeat that sentence for you. But we need to be reminded that that is our profession of faith. That we stand before the world and say that we hold these truths to be self-evident. That all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. That among these is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, to secure which governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That is our profession. That is our American creed. That is what we say we believe in. This is the image that we would like to project before the world and assure the world that it is upon these great ideals and upon these great principles that our society is built.
Delegates, please be in order. The convention.